Alright, hello, this is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and what I'm about to embark on is to go over the PowerPoints for Terry Felk-Morris, Web Development and Design Foundations with HTML5, the 8th edition. This is one of the two textbooks that will be used for AWD 1000 Web Technologies class. So let's get going. Notice our objectives for the chapter. There are about 10 or 11. Describe the evolution of the internet and the web, also known as the World Wide Web. Explain the need for web standards. Describe universal design. Identify benefits of accessible web design. Identify reliable resources of information on the web. Identify ethical use of the web. Describe the purpose of web browsers and of web servers. Identify networking protocols. Define URIs, which is a Universal Resource Indicator, and domain names. Describe HTML, XHTML, and HTML5. Finally, describe popular trends in the use of the web. So, the internet. Here's the author's definition of the internet. The interconnected network of computer networks that spans the globe. The key thing there is interconnected, or interconnected network. The idea is, and I believe we all know this, but what the internet does is it allows virtually anyone to communicate with anyone anywhere in the world. Reasons for internet growth in the 1990s. Well, again, when this started in the 1990s, the internet was basically meant kind of a twofold type of thing. It was meant to allow military communication to take place, and was also meant to allow different universities, educational institutions to communicate with one another. The person who's known as the father of the World Wide Web is Tim Berners-Lee. You'll hear his name a lot if you go and read about the history of the World Wide Web. All right. And they talk about in the 1990s that personal computers were increasingly becoming available and affordable, and going along with that, more and more powerful. The World Wide Web, as it says, the graphic user interface to information stored on computers running web servers connected to the internet. So in other words, the World Wide Web is part of the internet. The World Wide Web is not directly the internet itself. As far as some of the governing bodies of the internet, again, it's not my goal to read right here. One important thing to realize is if you look at that middle bullet that's there, what a lot of these governing bodies do is they make recommendations. And by and large, the browser manufacturers, Google Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Opera, etc., will follow these requests for comments. All right? But they're not typically, it's not that they're forced to do so. ICANN might be the best known out of all these. As it says, it assigns numbers and names. And it has changed over the years because, you know, part of its job is the assignment of IP or Internet Protocol addresses. But it had to change over time because of the fact that they started to run out of IP addresses. I look at this, and over a 20-year period, this being almost astronomical type of growth. Back in 1995, less than 1%, so that's really, this is over a 20-year period, less than half of 1% of people worldwide were using the internet. In 2015, that jumped up to 42.4%, and I probably wouldn't be able to click on this particular, no I can't, URL right here, but my guess is if we did, and we looked at that, I probably shouldn't have done that, but if we looked at this, try to bring that up. I don't know if it'll have anything as far as the stats today. Looks like it will. Now it's up to 49.6%. That means 1 out of every 2 people not in the United States, we're talking about 1 out of every 2 people in the world. 1 out of every 2 people in the world now has access to the internet. So let's talk about a couple definitions here, particularly the difference between an intranet and an extranet. I work for a technical college in Wentzville, Missouri. We have an intranet. The intranet allows people at our 3 different campuses to communicate to one another. We have an intranet that's available only to faculty and staff, and part of our intranet is also available to students. But it's confined, for lack of better words, to the institution. Now, imagine, on the other hand, that let's say that I was one of the bigwigs at Menards, all right? And I have a lot of people who are my suppliers. They're not people, they're people I work with. They're not people who work with me in that they work at the same company, but they're people that maybe a lot of different suppliers. Maybe for the tools that I carry, maybe I have 5 or 6 different suppliers. Well, the connections that I have with them, that would be a private network. That would be an extranet. Maybe that's not the best definition, but it's the one I typically give. All right, next we talk about the W3C, which stands for the World Wide Web Consortium. They're kind of the governing body for most everything that's related to the World Wide Web. Again, it says produces specifications called recommendations. Well, they also produce these requests for comments. That again, by and large, you find that basically all browser manufacturers end up supporting them. Most later than sooner, to be honest with you. They're also, the W3C is responsible for the WAI, which is the Web Accessibility Initiative. It's the idea that everyone, regardless of any kind of limitation they may have, sight, hearing, or something else, being mouse impaired, that they couldn't use the mouse, are able to access and utilize the World Wide Web. So if you want more information, you can go out to w3.org, WAI, which again is the Web Accessibility Initiative. If you want some of the guidelines, you can come out here. This is such a big thing because the more public the website is and the more you deal with the general public, the more important it is that you follow things like the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So the idea is that you make your website accessible to anyone who conceivably might want to use it. All right, something that's become hot, for lack of better words, over the years is the concept of universal design. Notice they define universal design here as the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. It's the idea that you create a website that's accessible to all. And I'm not just talking about people with possibly any kind of affliction here, but you're making it accessible to everybody and anybody. Now, years ago, I remember going with my wife to my wife's aunt's house. And like I said, this was many years ago. And she asked us if we were excited about tomorrow. And I had no idea what was going on tomorrow, so I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "You're not getting up early?" I said, "For what?" And she said, well, Lady Diana and Prince Charles are getting married tomorrow at about 3:30 in the morning in English time. Aren't you going to watch? And my wife was like, "No." And I was like, "No, I really didn't have any interest in it." But she proceeded to take out her National Enquirer newspaper and told us about the importance of this wedding and the ramifications it was going to have, etc. Well, the reason I bring that up is many people rely on the internet for their news. If they read something, they just take for granted that it's true. If they see it on the internet, they take for granted it's true. I remember years ago, back when Jon Stewart was hosting The Daily Show, him saying how there were many people who got their news every day from him, and he didn't sound very happy about it. He admitted that they were basically entertainment. They were meant to comment on the news, not to be the news. Well, the bottom line is, if you look at information that you find out on the World Wide Web someplace, these are questions you should ask. Wherever you got the information from, is the organization credible? For instance, I would much more trust CNN.com than I would some website that someone created that was private. How recent is the information? Are there links to additional resources? Is it Wikipedia? If you've never heard of Wikipedia, Wikipedia is basically an online encyclopedia. All right? But the difference is, back in when I was going to grade school and junior high school and even high school, when I used an encyclopedia, I could pretty much count on the fact that the stuff that was in there was accurate, all right, that it wasn't biased, etc. On the other hand, Wikipedia is not really biased, but anyone who signs up can basically go into Wikipedia and edit what's out there. So it's a little scary in that way. Now, what you'll find in the book is they will have these checkpoints. All right, I'm not going to go over any of them, but probably is worth your time if you look at any of the questions on here and they don't make sense, to go back and take a look at the material that's just been covered. All right, this is going to be quick because this program is not a hardware program. It is a software program. But it's important that you at least have an initial exposure to talking about some of the different things that are, for lack of better words, hardware related. So let's talk first about a network. A network, as it says, is two or more computers connected together. If they are directly connected together, if they're in the same room or the same building, etc., they're typically referred to as a LAN, or a local area network. If they're not physically connected, for instance, I work at the Wentzville campus. We have a campus in St. Louis, which is approximately 40 miles east of here. There is no wire running underneath the ground connecting the two campuses. So since there's not a physical connection, that's called a WAN, or a wide area network. But the purpose, as it says, is to be able to communicate and share resources. So there's a LAN and there's a WAN that I just mentioned to you. All right, internet backbone, a high-capacity communication link that carries data gathered from smaller links that interconnected. If you look at this map, I'm not going to bring it up, but if you do look at this map, basically what the internet looks like is just millions of, really billions of different connections, some direct and some indirect. This whole thing is based on the client server model, where the client is today typically a user who's sitting down in front of his or her computer. It could be a computer, it could be a laptop, it could be a desktop, it could be a tablet, it could be a mobile phone, all right, it could be a gaming console, it could be something else. But the client requests some kind of information. For instance, if I get out on the internet and I type in, it doesn't matter if I'm physically connected here to the network at Rankin or not, or whether I'm at my home. But if I go in there and type in www.rankin.edu, I'm telling it to use the World Wide Web to go out to Rankin Technical College's website. And that is housed on a server someplace. So me, being the client, requests some kind of a service. In that case, I'd be requesting the home page from Rankin's server. The server fulfills the request and transmits the results to the client over the network. This whole thing happens over something that's called HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So me at my computer type in some kind of a web address and I send in a Hypertext Transfer Protocol or HTTP request that goes to a server someplace. The server can either fulfill my request directly, or the server may have to send my request out to another server. But eventually it comes back to that server who sends my information back to me, the client, in as HTML or as hypertext markup language via an HTTP response. So the the client requests, the server responds. Now, this is an unbelievably simplistic view of this. And I'm saying unbelievably simplistic because of the fact when I look at that machine, it looks to me like it's a desktop machine. And if you haven't heard this already, really mobile devices have taken over. More than 50% of people who access the internet on a regular basis are using tablets and or cell phones. Less and less people today are using desktops. Even laptops in many ways are becoming somewhat antiquated. So there's the HTTP browser request. There's the HTTP server response. All the server is it's another computer that's very powerful, might be big, might be small, but it's got the ability to service browser requests. So the client connects to the internet as needed, usually runs some kind of a browser, uses HTTP, requests stuff from the server, receives web pages, files back as responses from the server. The server always is. Whereas the client is connected to the internet on an as-needed basis, the server should be connected to the internet 100% of the time, 24/7, 365 with no downtime. A server runs server software. Two of the best-known types of server software are Apache and IIS, or Internet Information Server. IIS is a Microsoft product. I don't know who controls Apache. Web servers, again, use HTTP, as I mentioned, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. They receive HTTP requests for the web page from the browser. They respond and transmit what they can back from the server to the browser. You'll sometimes hear of MIME types. MIME is an acronym, as it says there, Multi-Purpose Internet Mail Extension. And for lack of better words, it will tell you what kind of, your MIME type will tell you the type of file or the type of whatever you're working with. Internet protocols, there are a number of them. Protocols are, what you think they are. There's a protocol here at Rankin Technical College. The protocol says, for example, men may not wear any kind of jewelry other than watches and rings. All right? Women can wear studded earrings, but they can't wear any earrings other than that. No nose rings, etc. So those are protocols. Those are rules. But for internet protocols, they're rules that describe the methods used for clients and servers who communicate. There is no single protocol. There's a number of them. One of them I already mentioned. All right, and that was HTTP. There's also FTP, which stands for File Transfer Protocol. Again, FTP is a different set of rules that allow files to be exchanged between computers on the internet. Now, one thing about FTP, quite often with FTP, you might go out to a site where you're able to download information from the site, but you can't upload information to the site. If that's the case, you typically don't even have to sign in to use FTP. So if you're able to download but you can't upload, you typically are an anonymous FTP user. You don't have to log in. Web developers, as mentioned here, commonly use FTP to transfer web page files from their computers to web servers. You'll see this later on in the course. There are different email protocols. There's SMTP, the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. There's POP3, the Post Office Protocol. There's IMAP. Notice that SMTP is sending email. POP3 and IMAP are for receiving email. We already mentioned the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's the one most often associated with the internet. As mentioned there, it's a set of rules for exchanging different kinds of data. The browsers send HTTP requests. The servers send back HTTP responses. All right, we looked at it earlier. There's also TCP/IP, which, as it says, it's been adopted as the official communication protocol of the internet. TCP and IP have different functions that work together. TCP, the purpose, as it says, is to ensure the integrity of communication. What happens is, when you've got very large files you have to send over the internet, those very large files get broken down into pieces or chunks known as packets. The packets are sent over the internet, then on the other end, they must be put back together again. All right, that's the TCP part. IP, the Internet Protocol, as mentioned here, is a set of rules that controls how data is sent between computers. IP makes sure that things are sent to the correct destination address. Every computer has a unique IP address. So the author says here that if we put this in, we can try it. I don't have a clue as to whether or not it will actually work, but we can try it. The author claims that putting this into our browser will get us to Google. Now, I'm already at Google, so I guess I should go someplace else. Let's go to CNN.com. All right, now let's paste it in. And I'm trying to see whether or not this gets me back to Google. It says that it can't be reached. So, I don't know. Does that mean they gave me a wrong IP address? I don't know. The other big thing with an IP address, just so you know, is sometimes what you'll see is 127.0.0.1, and that's typically your own. That's your own machine. Now again, this class is not a hardware class. That's probably almost it for what you'll get for hardware. All right. A domain name like rankin.edu locates an organization or other entity on the internet. The domain name system, also known as DNS, divides the internet into logical groups. It associates unique IP address or addresses with things. We already looked at this. What's supposed to be is http://google.com should be that IP address, for example. All right. Rankin Technical College has its own IP address, really its own set of IP addresses. All right, a URI and a URL. A URL is a type of URI. A URI is a Uniform Resource Identifier. As it says, it identifies a resource on the internet. It may be real or, for lack of better words, almost a fictional resource. A URL, a Uniform Resource Locator, is again a type of URI. It represents an actual location. Now they give you an example right here where http://, that means you're using the HTTP or Hypertext Transfer Protocol. www, that means that you're using the World Wide Web. Webfoundations.net, that's the name of your domain. Under your domain, you're going to a folder called Chapter 1. Under the folder called Chapter 1 is an actual web page file called index.html. Now the TLD, the top level name in this case, is .net. You'll notice here there's a bunch of other ones. I've already mentioned that at Rankin Technical College we have rankin.edu, meaning we're an educational institution. There's things for the military, the government, education, all right, commerce. You know, some of these, there's kind of a bleeding between the com and the org and the net. All right, and there's a lot more that have popped up over the years. There's also country codes. as it says, they're 2-character codes originally intended to indicate the geographic location. Well, some of them do, like .uk. Some of the other ones, .tv, I'm not sure. In practice, it says it's fairly easy to obtain a domain name with a country code that is not local to the registrant. In other words, I could be in America and have a .uk or vice versa if I wanted to or needed to. The DNS I mentioned to you before, the domain name system, it associates the domain name with an IP address. So when I go and type in http://www.rankin.edu, it associates that domain name and sends it over, and it asks for something from the Rankin web server or one of the Rankin web servers. But it has to go and take that www, etc., and convert it into an IP address. And that's what they're talking about right here. All right, markup languages. Back in the day, when it all first started, there was a language called SGML. SGML stands for Standard Generalized Markup Language. It was meant to be kind of a template from which you could develop other languages. SGML itself was never genuinely used because it was so generic in its setup. But HTML was based off of SGML. So HTML, as it says there, is the set of markup symbols or codes placed in a file for display in a web browser. We're going to talk a lot about HTML, and there's a lot of places that you can find information about it. What I'm going to very quickly here do is type in w3schools.com. All right? And that is the World Wide Web Consortium's teaching site. And I'm going to click the search bar here, and I'm going to type in HTML tags. All right, tags with HTML code, HTML tags used, HTML tags, HTML reference. That's probably a good one. These are all the different tags that make up HTML. I've never taken the time to count them. Let's say that there's approximately 100. Some of these tags you're going to see when you look at them are reddened, all right, which means those tags have been deprecated. All right, well, what is deprecated? We're all deprecated, which means that we all have a life and eventually we're not there anymore. With HTML tags that have been deprecated, the idea is when you do new website development, you should not use these tags. But unlike human beings and human beings being deprecated, these tags, even though they're deprecated, may be around for years and years, potentially for hundreds of years. Some of these tags have got a little red 5 by them, which means they're new to HTML5. When HTML started, here should not be a surprise, but you had HTML 1.0. Over time, you got HTML 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 4.1, and then someone decided that we shouldn't really have HTML anymore. All right, it was antiquated, so we were going to come up with a new language called XML, the Extensible Markup Language. One of the differences between HTML and XML is HTML has a defined list of about 100 tags. With XML, you could create your own tags, but you had to make sure if you were two companies talking to one another, you agreed on what the tags meant. Now, the author says here, XML is not intended to replace HTML. It is intended to extend the power by separating data from presentation. Now, that's the author's take. She very well could be a much wiser person than me. But I was always told that XML was originally designed to be a replacement for HTML. But it never, although it has people who love it and use it, and it's used in a lot of different types of software, it never quite got the, what am I looking for? It never quite got the popularity and use of HTML. So over time, someone came back and said, you know what? I think that XHTML isn't cutting it for regular website development. let's go back and let's create a new version of HTML. And that's how HTML5 evolved. It's sort of, as it says, it's the natural progression from HTML4, HTML 4.01, and XHTML. But it's designed to do a lot of the things that previously HTML could not do. We're going to start by going over HTML, and it will eventually be introduced to HTML5 as well. Popular uses of the internet, I don't need to read this to you. So, in this chapter, what did we do? We talked about the evolution of the internet and the World Wide Web. We explained why web standards are necessary. We looked a little bit at universal design, sometimes called the universal experience, or UX. We identified some of the benefits of accessible web design. We looked at some of the resources of information on the web. We talked a little bit about ethical use of the web. We defined the purpose of web browsers and web servers when we looked at that client-server model. And again, as I said, with looking at that model, okay, that it wasn't real life in that it showed a desktop. Where, to really be honest and talk about this model today, for the client, you should show a desktop and a laptop and a tablet and a phone. We identified some of the networking protocols. We looked at HTTP, FTP, TCP/IP. We looked a little bit at URIs and URLs, talked about domain names. I mentioned to you the progression of HTML into XHTML, into XML, and now into HTML5. Finally, we looked at some of the popular uses on the internet today. So that's it. All right, so when I return, I'm going to go into Chapter 2. And Chapter 2 will be on HTML basics. So I'll be back with that presentation shortly.